Alice sat by the river bank, feeling hot, sleepy, and rather bored. Then the strangest thing happened. Out of nowhere, a white rabbit, clutching a pocket watch, dashed past and disappeared down a rabbit hole. "Hey, Mr. Rabbit," called Alice, feeling perfectly awake again. And with that she chased after him and found herself falling down, down, around and around. Alice landed with a bump and found herself in a room surrounded by doors. She tried every single one, but they were all locked. Then she spotted a table with a tiny key on top, and it fitted the tiniest door. But Alice could only peep through at the beautiful garden on the other side. "How annoying," she exclaimed. Next, Alice noted a bottle with the words "Drink Me" on it. She took a small sip and shrank to a teeny tiny size. But she had left the key on the table, so she couldn't open the tiny door. "How annoying," exclaimed Alice again. Then Alice spotted a cake with the words "Eat Me" on it. Why not, she thought, taking a nibble. And with that she grew and grew and grew, so big that her head hit the ceiling, and she started to cry. Alice cried so hard that her tears began to flood the room, opening one of the doors. When at last Alice shrank again, she found herself swimming in a sea of her own tears, along with lots of other creatures. The water washed them right out of the house, and Alice swam to land to get dry. All seemed well until, suddenly, the white rabbit dashed past again. "Where are the Duchess's gloves?" he called to Alice, and ordered her into a nearby cottage to find them. Inside, Alice started to grow again. "Oh no," she cried in despair as her arms stuck out of the windows. The animals outside were so scared that they threw pebbles at Alice, and the pebbles turned into tiny cakes. "Well, I might as well try one," gulped Alice, through more tears, and with one nibble she started to shrink again. Now Alice was really confused. She ran into the woods, where she came across a big blue caterpillar sitting on an enormous mushroom. "Nibble one side of the mushroom to get taller," advised the caterpillar wisely, "and nibble on the other side to get smaller." "Yes, why not?" said Alice, and she experimented until she felt about the right size again. "What a relief," she sighed. It was then that Alice noted the Cheshire Cat sitting in a tree. "You should visit the March Hare," said the Cheshire Cat helpfully. Then he disappeared, all except for his big grin, which floated in the air. So Alice then went to the March Hare's house, where there was a tea party. "I'd love a cup of tea," said Alice, looking at the other guests, the March Hare, the Mad Hatter, and a very sleepy Dormouse. "Here, time stands still," explained the Mad Hatter. "It is always tea time." The tea party guests talked nonsense, so Alice left to explore and came across a pretty garden. In the middle were 3 gardeners in the shape of playing cards, busy painting white roses red. "The Queen of Hearts hates white roses," they muttered. "Quick, she's coming." And with that, a procession arrived. There were more playing cards, the King and Queen of Hearts, and the White Rabbit. Alice could hardly believe it when the Queen shouted to her, "Here, you, come and play with us." So Alice joined in the strangest game ever. They played using flamingos and hedgehogs, and it was chaos. Suddenly a voice shouted, "The trial is beginning." Everyone dashed to the courtroom of Hearts is accused of stealing the Queen's tarts," announced a bossy man to the jury. "Ooh," exclaimed the jury, which was made up entirely of creatures great and small. As the trial continued, Alice became more and more confused and more annoyed. She also started to grow and grow. "Calling Alice," shouted the bossy man. But as Alice tried to walk through the courtroom, she knocked over the jury box and all the animals in it. "Off with her head," shrieked the Queen of Hearts. Alice had had enough. "You're all just a pack of cards," she yelled as playing cards flew into the air and down over her. At that very moment, Alice woke up. She was by the river bank again, with nothing but a few leaves falling gently over her. It had all been a dream, the strangest, most amazing dream ever. Time for tea, thought Alice, smiling to herself. I hope you are feeling sleepy. Next we have Jack and the Beanstalk. Jack and the Beanstalk. Beanstalk. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Jack who lived in a small cottage with his mother. The only possession they had in the world was a cow named Milky White, whose milk they sold at the market. But one day, Milky White stopped giving milk, and Jack's mother told him to sell her so they could get some money for food. The next morning, on his way to the market, Jack met a strange old man who proposed to swap Milky White for a handful of beans. But they're not just any beans, the man told Jack. They're magic. Jack knew he had to have them. "If they don't grow," the old man said, "I'll give you your cow back and will throw in a free bag of cow manure for your trouble." That sealed the day, and they made the exchange. Once he was around the next bend, the old man let out a whoop. He couldn't believe his luck. Ever since he'd eaten one of those awful beans, he'd had terrible pains in his stomach. He'd been coughing up leaves, and shoots had begun growing out of his ears. When Jack arrived home, he proudly showed his mother the beans and told her of the special deal he had made with the old man. His mother took the beans and looked at them. "What?" she exclaimed. "How could you be so foolish as to give away our Milky White for a handful of beans?" And with that she threw the beans at Jack and they bounced out of the window. To Jack's delight, when he woke the next morning, he saw that the beans had grown in the night. They had formed a beanstalk that climbed up and up until it vanished into the clouds. Jack ran to the garden to take a closer look. "I wonder where it ends," thought Jack. "I bet I could easily climb it and see." So he took a firm hold and began to climb higher and higher into the sky. At the top, he found himself beside a cobbled road that led to an enormous castle. Jack stood still with his mouth gaping open. He couldn't believe his luck. "You there, stop!" Jack turned and saw a woman rushing towards him. "Do not go near that castle. A monstrous giant lives there who has stolen many treasures from the folk who live in this land, and he eats children like you for breakfast." Now, Jack wasn't the brightest boy in the world, and he had never been in a castle before, so he ignored the woman and continued up the road. When Jack arrived at the castle, he knocked on the door, and it was opened by the biggest, tallest woman Jack had ever seen. was in fact a giantess. Jack cleared his throat. "Good morning, ma'am," he said politely. "Would you be so kind as to spare a poor boy some breakfast?" The giantess had always liked children, so Jack was soon sitting at her table eating porridge out of one of her thimbles. Just as he finished his last spoonful, the house began to shake. "Oh no," cried the giantess, "my husband is home, and if he finds you here, he'll eat you for breakfast. Quick, hide in the oven." Before Jack could think about whether or not an oven was the best place to hide from a hungry giant, he leapt in and the door was shut behind him. The giant thumped into the room and stopped abruptly, sniffing the air. He then cried out in a voice like thunder, "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. But be he alive or be dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." "Nonsense," said the giantess. "It must be the man you had for dinner yesterday." She brought him a plate of roast beef and patted his giant head. Once the giant had finished his meal, he got up and opened the door to an adjoining room. Jack could see, through a crack in the oven door, that the room was filled with bags of glorious, shining gold. The giant sat down and began to count some of the money, until eventually his head began to nod and he started to snore. Jack crept out of the oven. As he tiptoed past the giant, he snatched a bag of gold and ran as fast as he could to the Beanstalk. When he got home, he told his mother of his adventure and proudly showed her his loot. "With this money we can eat well for months," she exclaimed. She hugged Jack tightly. Encouraged by his mother's reaction, Jack woke the next morning and climbed the Beanstalk again. Once he reached the top, he ran past the woman as she tried again to warn the silly boy, went straight to the castle door and knocked. Soon Jack was sitting at the table while the giantess smiled and watched him eat his porridge. But again, as he finished his breakfast, the house began to tremble. Jack quickly scrambled into the oven. Just as the giant stomped in, the giant bellowed, "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." But the giantess just chuckled and gave the giant some chicken nuggets. Afterwards, the giant left the kitchen for a moment and came back holding a hen. The giant placed the hen and her nest on the table and said, "Lay." Miraculously, the hen did as she was told and laid an egg made entirely of gold. After patting the hen and smiling at the egg for quite some time, the giant's head began to nod and he started to snore once again. Quick as a flash, Jack crept out of the oven, grabbed hold of the hen and the golden egg and climbed as fast as he could down the Beanstalk. When he got home, he proudly showed his mother the giant hen and she marvelled at the magnificent solid gold egg. The next morning, Jack was up the Beanstalk before the sun had risen. Once again, as Jack was eating porridge, the house began to shake, and Jack climbed into the oven. The giant came in, bellowed something about an Englishman, and ate his lamb wrap. Then he got up and left the room for a moment, returning with a beautiful antique harp. The giant put the harp on the table and said, "Sing." At once the golden harp came to life and began to sing beautifully. It sang until the giant's head began to nod and he began to snore. Jack crept out of the oven and snatched the harp in front of the sleeping giant, but as he did, the harp cried out, "Master, master!" and the giant instantly awoke.